Awesome. We can get started. Thanks everybody for joining. Excited to kick things off here. This is our second webinar in a series that we'll do for ecosystem leaders and developers. Interestingly enough, we had folks from 31 different countries and organizations, ecosystem leaders sign up for this. So pretty global presence from, I'll continue you guys a list, but it's pretty cool to see. And I think it's a lot because it's such a relevant topic for everybody, not just AI, but sort of how do you collaborate on a regional level through AI, and how universities and cities and regional organizations play a part in fostering this. So we'll talk a bit about that. I'm Darren from Deal Room, and joining me here, I have two guests. I will read the AI generated bio that I got for you guys, so hopefully it does you justice. So Charles Mansfield from Pittsburgh. He's the Ecosystem Community and Research Manager at InnovatePGH, where he connects founders, corporates, investors, and talent to strengthen Pittsburgh's innovation ecosystem. He has a background in venture capital and startup support. He helps early stage companies navigate growth, capital, and partnerships. And he's a frequent voice on hard tech innovation and ecosystem building in the region, bringing academia, industry, and investors together to accelerate collaboration and opportunity. And Paul is from Michigan State University. He's a managing director of the venture creation at the university's Burgess Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, helping students and alumni ventures move from idea to market. He's a founder and advisor to multiple startups, deeply involved in mentoring and community building across Michigan's entrepreneurial network. And before joining Burgess, he led engagement efforts for Michigan State's innovation programs. Through his work, he fosters dynamic campus ecosystem, linking students, mentors, and funding partners. Is that all right? All right, cool. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about sort of what's happening in AI and as that relates to your community, universities, and sort of, maybe share some things that are happening both in Pittsburgh and Michigan that can be some takeaways. To start, I'm going to share a couple of quick slides just to set some context on AI. It's the buzzword, but for good reason too. So I'll share a few slides just to show you some growth and maybe some interesting stats to set some context, and then we can jump into some questions. If you have any questions at the end, feel free to chat them, and then at the end we can save about 5 minutes to answer any questions that you guys may have as well. So let me share my screen. Cool. Alrighty. So the growth is real. So this is enterprise value for AI companies over the last decade, and obviously it's exploded. It'll continue to grow, but just to put some actual numbers behind it, we're approaching over about almost 15 trillion in total enterprise value of AI companies. So it is big, and when you visualize it, you realize like, wow, where we've come from 10 years ago to now, it's kind of insane. And if you take a sort of global perspective, look at it, obviously North America is highly concentrated in getting majority of the funding, followed by Europe, APAC, and then you can see the distribution for the rest of the world. Let's see what's happening there. This is my favorite slide. I think it's interesting, and maybe people don't necessarily know this because you look at AI as one big giant thing. And it's actually broken down into sort of 4 different layers, whereas you have the application layer, operational layer, foundation layer, which is what probably most of us are familiar with, the ChatGPTs, Minstrel, Anthropics, the companies that have received a lot of funding rounds. And then you have the infrastructure layer. And so it's always sort of interesting to take a step back and to say, within these, what's actually receiving the most funding, but also like what types of things within AI are actually getting funded the most. So we're going to talk a little bit about the university role, which is ever-growing importance in sort of AI and research and sort of just the ecosystems as a whole. And so if you look outside of Silicon Valley, Boston, I just wanted to share this. This is hubs that have below 100 billion in enterprise AI value in funding. just to show you the different cities. So it's not just maybe your typical cities you would think of that have a lot of founders doing things related to AI. It's kind of happening all over the place, which is really interesting to see, from LA, Philadelphia, Vancouver, don't forget about Canada, North Carolina. So it's very distributed in terms of, people doing research within the AI space. Not to forget about Europe. This is also looking at Europe outside of London as well. Also pretty lots of things happening related to founders, founding companies within AI as well. By the way, if you can share these slides afterwards, if anybody would like them. So as I shared earlier, sort of that foundational layer, which is where you see a lot of the funding, the GPTs, the minstrels, that's sort of dominating a lot of the funding in these mega rounds over 100 million, but which accounts for about 80% plus of all the funding so far this year within AI. Not to say that there isn't funding happening at all stages, but there's a lot of large rounds happening. Obviously, it's an industry that takes large funding to accelerate. If you're interested in learning more about like where your city stands at AI or different sort of aspects of it and benchmarking it, feel free to check out our benchmarking tool. It's pretty cool. And if you have any questions, also feel free to reach out. We're happy to share some data with you about your city, other cities, etc. Cool. So, let's get back to the chat. All right. So as we mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about AI and becoming an AI first economy. I want to start off just sort of with a general question for both of you, which is, what does an AI economy first mean to you? And what type of mindset do you sort of have to have as a economic development leader in your region to really shape what that looks like? Either of you start. Charles, maybe.
I think it's an interesting question because of how ubiquitous AI is. As in my head, I was internally struggling, like, what does an AI first kind of economy even mean? It's just like we were saying, like this like sea change / acceleration of innovation across the board. So, and it really means much in terms of changing how I think we should generally approach ecosystem development. Like, I think, as usual, it means like we should try to be innovating at the speed of our founders on how do we support them, right? Like, or what tools are we leveraging to kind of create and facilitate networks and network creation, connect our founders to capital, customers, each other. Like how are we leveraging tools to in our own operations to do that better? There are like larger questions around what the overall, like, how are we thinking about, like, I don't know, compute access and these kind of like larger questions around what is the infrastructure needed in this kind of like AI economy, and how are we positioning our regions to be providers or at least take advantage of this change in some way. Like, they're strategic, larger strategic questions. But on a day-to-day standpoint, I think it's just I don't think it's too different from how I think we should have been thinking about this prior. It's just it's another impetus. It's an impetus for us to go faster on our end. So yeah.
Paul.
Yeah, I'll kind of answer it in a couple different ways. More of like a startup student side and then the venture side. In my bio too, I do have a venture fund. Just a small $5 million fund. We're outside of the university that we invest in the companies too. That wasn't in there. So AI didn't pull that one up. So yeah, on the student side, I'm sitting here in our business school right now. What it means to me, these students, it's moving things so much faster. But on the education side and the job side, it's very interesting to see. AI is as good as what the students adopted. I don't know. They're adopting it. Okay, it's pretty interesting to see. They're not all using it, but they should. And in a lot of the classrooms, it's kind of a no-no. I think some of the profs are saying, you can't use that. That's cheating. That's different. And many of us here encourage it. And we want to show them how to utilize it and use it in a different way. So it's making people teach in a really different way. On the startup side, I feel like everyone and their brother is talking about, I have this, and AI does this. It's like when machine learning was hot, and saying, hey, machine learning, and this has to have that. So I don't know. It's more of us, trying to find if kind of sniffing out if the AI works. Are they the best at it or better than others at it? And it's kind of weird as an investor to look at AI because we don't know. It's like examples like when first electric vehicles come out, which one do we invest into? Because there's so many of them right now. There's something's going to bubble up to the top, and we're seeing that kind of go as it goes on.
Charles, so how do you see AI, and this is a good question being in Pittsburgh, influencing traditional industries, manufacturing, healthcare, mobility, and how are founders actually responding to that change?
Yeah. So kind of some more context on Pittsburgh. We have been leaders in AI since AI's creation, thanks to Carnegie Mellon, #1 AI university, probably since then. And so we've historically seen kind of variations because of that core competency of just like waves, right? So when autonomous vehicles were booming in 2019, and we saw like a large wave of investment in companies, and in that realm, now we're seeing companies like Abridge, the global leader in healthcare AI, kind of based in HQ in Pittsburgh, innovating in the kind of the voice AI space within healthcare. We see a company like Echo Robotics, one of the leaders in robotics, and how do we kind of the question they try to tackle is how do we monitor existing physical infrastructure, places that humans can't get on, right? So like sides of Navy ships or within I don't know, an oil tanker or blah blah, like places where humans, it just doesn't make sense for humans to be, but we need to monitor and make sure they don't explode or they don't degrade over time. And so and kind of leveraging artificial intelligence and robotics and hardware to get access to that data. Pittsburgh also has a long history in the legacy industrial manufacturing steel, right? Like Michigan, Detroit, one of these like kind of Rust Belt cities, where you saw like a decline in manufacturing and over time, and so a lot of like legacy industries that our companies are trying to sell to, trying to build in. I think there's a lot of challenge there where the competition isn't necessarily other companies, but non-adoption, and finding like the right founder skill set that can, maybe it's industry experience, maybe it's customer empathy, but they can kind of break through that. Because again, I think a lot of these legacy industries, they're legacy for a reason, right? They haven't adopted technology for 20, 30 years. Or at least they've been behind pace for about 20 to 30 years, and so it's more with them. I think it's more of a sales challenge than a product one, tactically, and so that's what I see with a lot of our companies and the companies that can break through. Right, it gets really sticky, and you get like Gecko and Abridge, or these companies that are like multi-billion valuations, and so yeah, that's what we see.
What do you, Paul?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Charles. I would throw not only Michigan, but just Midwest, saying, we're known as manufacturing. People look at Michigan and they say Detroit. That's what we have. But if you saw on that list in the top running, Ann Arbor is right up there with, AI companies that are in there. I think Michigan is particularly hot right now with AI. We are not Silicon Valley. We'll never be Silicon Valley, but we have some amazing companies that are launching these ideas, getting some very good funding. And on my side, it's a very good thing because their valuations are relatively low in the Midwest, which is good. They're reaching out to the West Coast and East Coast for some funding and resources. But it's interesting to see. But yeah, we're getting tons. This has been the best area to look in, and it's just totally increasing with, new ideas coming in with AI. And I know we've had a few unicorns that came out of Michigan, but I know we're going to have several more very soon, and they'll probably be all in AI.
How do you support that, Paul, from a sort of a university perspective? So those students that maybe can't necessarily find as much funding as they would need to scale locally, like how do you help, support them in their funding journey, or make sure that, they maybe stay local, but can raise more funding from outside if needed?
So it's an interesting thing. So I started the venture creation process here at the university, at Michigan State University, about 13 years ago. And there was nothing here. I mean, I think entrepreneurship was a naughty word to a lot of people that were here. We actually give resources to students as they start their companies. So our area called the Burgess Institute, we give them funding, we give them interns, we give them space. It's all for free. So we don't take any equity in the company at all. And they have to be students. It's not university IP. This is student ideas. But I get them out there. I get them out to pitch competitions. I get them out to conventions. I was just up in Traverse City this week at an alumni event. Sunday, I'm leaving for TechCrunch, taking 3 teams out there. So getting them out front of others. And I'm okay with them leaving for a bit, because I'm seeing the trend as they're going out and getting into Techstars, getting into YC. But the trend is coming back. We're a great place in an inexpensive space to have a family, tons of resources, but the funding isn't always there. So it's okay to get that money. The issue is when they get into a place like YC, which I do love. I love YC, and I'm not bashing them, but they'll come pre-revenue with a $20-30 million valuation. And that's not Midwest at all. So it's tough for any investor here to kind of throw in on that.
What anything, Charles?
I could talk for hours on venture development and tier 2 and tier 3 ecosystems. Read a whole article on it. I think in Pittsburgh, similar to Michigan, I think it's uniquely weird in the scale of the challenge, right? Like, so we have maybe 8 unicorns in 8 years. We're hitting about unicorn a year rate. We lose about, it's hard to keep track of, but like maybe a third of our companies at the earliest stages, because it's just so undercapitalized relative to the quantity and quality of companies. Like, of those 8 unicorns, maybe we have local private capital and maybe one of them, right, a little bit. And so, and I know of a couple of unicorns that left at the earliest stages. And that's weird. Like, it's just not a thing you see in a lot of like city-sized kind of ecosystems, because it's either you have, the prerequisite, you have like a proportion amount of capital. And so like that number's a lot more, maybe it's like 50-50, maybe it's like 60% of your best companies. Or you just don't have the companies, right? And you're making a bet on the future of an ecosystem. It's weird to like be able to look at the past and see a lot of that and still see, right? Like we have probably less local capital today than we had 10 years ago, which is also weird. And so I've been kind of very specially focused on like, how do you do that? Like, why is that the case? Why is it you see so much capital concentration, SF in New York? I asked PitchBook, I was like, give me median returns by geographic area. It was actually the best place to have been an average investor was Michigan over the last 15 years. It was Detroit, because of everything we talk about with like the prices, and then like if you're in the right funds, you're on the right companies at the right times. Like it was like the median TVPI was about 4 or something like that, which is crazy. Which doesn't happen in venture. And kind of speaks to there's just an over concentration of capitals in some of these like hot areas. I think we haven't. That's kind of led to like just 2 entirely different venture ecosystems and conversations around like Paul was saying, about valuations, about time due diligence, about some of like the cultural dynamics that we're seeing, like giving term sheets to 11-year-olds, stuff like that.
Paul, when it comes to sort of giving entrepreneurs advice that are pretty early stage, like what are the top things that you tell them? And if you see something that's pretty interesting to you, how do you involve other stakeholders, whether it be someone at a corporate company that could have interest in what they're building or the university to get involved?
Yeah. So the number one thing that I push is, get whatever idea is out there. If it's tech, if it's physical product, whatever. I think the younger generation has I think it has an issue with trying to brand it and trying to name it before they have nothing. So they're buying backpacks and T-shirts and things like that before the product is even out there. So customer discovery on our side is huge. Just trying to get, if it's an app, get it out there, get people to use it and try it, hate it, like it, change it, so they can go through with it, so we can not waste a bunch of funds. That's kind of my number one thing to push towards them before we do anything else. Obviously, if it needs to be protected with patent, things like that, we look at things like that. Yeah, on the university side, with us, we don't turn anybody away. It's interesting in our areas, we're not a fund on campus. We give grants out and things like that, but we don't turn anybody away because we're education first. So we're actually giving them the tools and the monies and the resources to crash and burn. And I think that's why we're a little bit different than many others is, we're taking bets on some of them. They're going to bubble up. The top, 15 teams will bubble up to the end of the year, but we're seeing hundreds of teams per year that are going through the process, and majority are going to fail. But the rest of them are going to get really, really good jobs. And that's the way they're seeing it. Of course, they want them to have a degree. They want to know what they've learned in the process with their degree, but they all talk about, you started a company and you raised some money and you hired some people, like, come here, I want to talk to you. But then that trend again we're seeing is they're taking a job, they're hating it most of the time, and then they're starting up either a startup that they had while they were here or connecting with somebody else. Quick example, I just had a student last year that had an idea here, did okay, it failed, took a job out in California, connected with a few friends from Stanford, this got into YC with a new idea. And he said, what I learned from what you guys are doing, I got through the process for that. So, and to me, that's success. I love that part of it.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I'll stay on that for a second. Like, how do you actually, if you sort of are supporting without asking anything for return sometimes, right? So how are you guys measuring success other than the obvious of like, do they continue to grow? And like, how does a university also look at that from a supporting, the venture group?
Yeah, so two different sides of it. So we're, university is big on rankings. So, we're ranked in the Princeton Review and different things like that. So a lot of us follow on funding. So, the teams that do bubble up to the top 15, of course, I'm making connections to industry experts, to other outside investors. We have a great funding resource here on campus with our MSU Research Foundation called Red Cedar Ventures and Michigan Rise that actually invests in the companies, which is great. It's a great resource for them. They have a accelerator called the Conquer Accelerator that they can go through, which is amazing. $20,000, going through a 8 to 10 week accelerator. On the other side of it, a lot of people have asked that, why don't take any equity, or what do you get back? We are seeing a return from these students and these teams without even asking. They've gone through the process and they're coming back and say, I couldn't have got anywhere without you guys. So we're seeing a lot of them, give financially, but my ask to them is give back as a mentor to these other teams too. And they do. It helps out a ton in that way. And then obviously a lot of alumni love to give back and support the program because they want to see it grow and have others moving.
Cool. Charles, for you mentioned like Carnegie Mellon, which is sort of ubiquitous with AI research. And I remember when like Uber actually did first self-driving back in like early 2010 or whatever it was, before it was what it is now. And it was kind of a crazy thing, like, oh, they're going to allow self-driving in Pittsburgh and these like, and so, which is interesting in itself, as in the sense that, some regions aren't even open to stuff like that because it's so sort of out of the box thinking, or has this risk associated with it. But I think Pittsburgh has been sort of grabbing onto the fact that these industries, which are moving so fast, have so much opportunity here because of our institutions. And so how do you like work with them to make sure that like these really small companies that maybe you also identify as doing something that could be very interesting, gets connected with them so that they can help support and utilize their researchers and professors and their extended network, right? How this all works to really help them grow.
Yeah. So in terms of company connection to universities, I think the primary mode there is talent. So a couple of the universities locally, right? So we have CMU, Pitt, but like a plethora of universities in the region, like a really large amount. Have instituted will pay for our students to do a low pay or unpaid internships, which have been a very great kind of opportunity for a lot of the startup community locally to kind of get access to high quality talent. And those students are still getting paid. They're still able to feed themselves and such. And they're also getting access to just valuable experience working with startup, right? You can't really substitute that. And so that's like the primary mode of connection, as well as, there's some kind of external company to researcher pipeline stuff, but I think it's more of you see more of the, we're spinning out a research project proposal into an actual company, versus like, after I have a company, then I'm coming to find researchers, at least right now. The other kind of note I'd say on kind of founder support within the university, but just generally, that I've become a fan of is this concept of like kind of like what Paul was saying earlier about talk to your customers. Like I found the most helpful I've been to founders when I've just been connected them to problems. right. When I say, because I'm such a networker, because I'm just a connector in the wild, in the city, I just happen to know, you're kind of corporate innovation lead at a couple local retirement homes. This is the actual story. You run a couple of retirement homes and you want to make them the most innovative retirement home community in the country. This is an actual person, actual kind of place. And then I randomly meet a company a couple months later that's saying, hey, like I'm a pre-seed company. I want to sell this product to retirement homes. I just made that connection, and it turned into $80K hour contract, which is amazing for pre-seed company. But like that kind of like what like hyper locality allows you to do, from a matching problems with problem solvers, and then that scales, right? Like because how many retirement homes exist in the country? How many of these kind of local needs are national and global needs?
Totally. They always say your first customers are usually in your backyard. Paul, are there any stories that you can share, maybe the companies that spun out that are known or maybe lesser known, or anything that's maybe just super interesting that you found that came out of MSU?
Yeah, we've had a few. One notably from a while ago, about 13 years ago, was called Remind 101. And if anybody has kids in the U.S., I think it was U.S. I don't know if it was overseas. It was an app to remind students and kids of quizzes and tests. It was very simple and easy. They raised, I think it was about 80 million, mostly Kleiner Perkins money. Just had an exit recently. Great company, and that was a student company of ours a while ago. Yeah, we've had a few new ones that we're working on. We've had a couple that were on Shark Tank. I know that's a show, but had a couple on there that got some really good exposure in there. Then, yeah, like I said, we're heading out to TechCrunch this week, and we're having a panel of about 4 or 5 that were in YC. So it's great to see, they get that $500,000 check, and then they've raised, 2-3 million that go throughout that. So, one notably I'll talk about is talking about AI. One had a different company before, especially with us, and then just launched a new drive-through AI platform that's working with a lot of fast food restaurants that got into YC, which we're starting to see. I don't know if you've seen any of those platforms coming through. I think Kentucky Fried Chicken and several others are having that. So it's interesting to see how these are going to bubble out. Do I invest in a company like that because there's going to be 20 or 30 of them out there? You know, which one's better or not? So yeah, we're seeing some really cool ideas come through.
How risky are you guys, like, when it comes to AI stuff? Obviously, you said earlier, like, there's a lot of unknowns, and you know, this is sort of uncharted territory to some extent.
Yeah.
And so, if you're thinking about like investing, or is there sort of like here's our scale of riskiness based on this, or how do you look at it, or how does the university look at that?
Well, again, the university, we don't turn anybody away, so we don't invest. This is grant money they're getting, so we're very wide open to any and all idea. The thing that I do is, you know, the initial meeting, I think sometimes students get hung up on not doing a lot of research, just to be honest. They'll come in and say, we're the only ones that are doing this. And I'm like, have you Googled this? There's about 20 of these out here, maybe more. So yeah, it's tough because there's a ton of people out there. I am better when students say to me, yeah, there's a lot of people doing this, but this is how we're doing it different and better. And that's, yeah, I'd love to work with them on that. On the investor side, separate from the university, AI to me and our team is kind of tough because it's really hard to sniff out really what's going to work. We're relying on, you know, if people are first in, if they've had an investor, you know, looking at their diligence, what they've done, talking to industry experts to get their sense on it. And then we do use a couple AI platforms to do kind of sniff test on some of our diligence too, which we don't use for 100%, but it does help on that side. And if it's something we want to go with, we think it can give our LPs a good markup, then we move forward.
Charles, what's some sort of just practical advice you can give other leaders in different cities, positions that interact with startups, to help them think about sort of AI as it relates to their business and ways of working with organizations like yourselves or universities?
Yeah. I think there's no substitute for relationship building. Right, when it comes to connecting founders to capital, customers, and each other, which I think are some of the most important things we can do for our founders, and tends to be the biggest impediment in some of these ecosystems is just like the people networks. And so to that front, some of my favorite AI tools are I love happenstance.ai, which is a pretty new tool that you can kind of query your network and say, hey, who in my network invests in supply chain companies? And we're looking at a supply chain company ready for investment. Or like tools such as that are some of my favorite, like in this kind of like AI enabled pseudo CRM network management space. Bordy, it's kind of gotten a lot of buzz. I've gotten, which kind of connects you with other people in an AI that connects you with other people in the Bordy network. Which I used a lot to connect with a lot of external capital interest in Pittsburgh. And so stuff like that, like no substitute for that time.
Yeah. And Paul, I guess maybe, your perspective, or, from the university's perspective somewhat, what's an investment you think for AI that would, whether it's talent, infrastructure, et cetera, that could help Michigan become a leader in AI?
That's a really good question. I haven't talked much about talent. And I think that's a big issue that many of these companies, startups are having. So I think, investing into some type of, talent retention software, AI platform, and I think the state of Michigan is really pushing towards that. But also something that many students can find out where some of these jobs are and making connections. The computer science students, in the last few years, they were very sought after, very high salaries. and they're still sought after, but in a different way. A lot of the jobs are kind of going away, but we're never going to lose the human touch part of, coding. We still need parts of that. AI is going to do a good amount of it, but we still need that. So I think using some type of a platform to make connections to, some of these companies that are out there, doesn't need to be in Michigan or Midwest. It can be anywhere, but I haven't seen much of that yet.
Yeah, got it. Charles, what about you? What can the city as sort of collective ecosystem do?
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh's biggest problems are retention, not necessarily a 0-to-1 creation, although I do have a lot of thoughts on maybe we should be implementing more venture studio models and stuff like that. But I think our biggest challenge is retention, and the biggest reason for that is capital. We have a lot of problems here. We have a lot of corporates. We have a lot of customers. We can be better at kind of connecting those dots between the customers and the companies, especially at the earliest stages, right? The first program, first customer pilots and stuff like that. But it's really just with us, it's a capital issue. And so in that realm, what the state can do and kind of what the city, state region can do, I don't know, finding more ways to incentivize external capital that's high quality to come here, right? Whether that's with the LP function or with a matching kind of investment function. That's more fund to funds, and maybe a fund to funds to kind of invest in a lot of our local capital. I think Ohio's been really great at a lot of this stuff, but. And like those types of investments, and Ohio, Israel a couple of years ago was like very great at a lot of that stuff. And so that kind of work, I think, is probably like where I'd lean. And then one other program that the city runs, I think, can be copied in other cities is the city of Pittsburgh has a program where it lets startups pilot problems and solutions and products with the city to solve city problems. So that might be, oh wow, we need an accounting software for the city's financial department, yada yada. Like how can we leverage the city as the government, right, as a first customer, and help startups in that GovTech space.
Cool. I'm gonna ask one more question to each of them. If anybody has any questions, though, feel free to chat it, and then we can wrap up in about 5 minutes or so. You can chat in the box there. So obviously, as with any emerging or industry that's sort of growing at a rapid pace, it's not without controversy and figuring out things as you go. I remember just sort of Airbnb, sort of the regulation around that created. This is a whole different ballgame with AI. So I guess I'll start with you, Paul. What are some of the challenges that you foresee that's AI is creating, and sort of how do you tackle them, or pick one? Maybe it's efficiency.
Yeah, well, easy at the university. Students doing work with just AI. It's been interesting. The one thing that we tell them is use AI, we just don't copy and paste. I mean, that's the biggest thing, and we can tell. I mean, everybody can tell that you're using AI, but of course, you use it as kind of a help with you, what you can do, and then add to it. On the other side of it, when there's startups that are out there, you can see that they're using it with websites. You can see that they're using it on certain things, and I think they're just trying to use it sometimes just to get through it as fast as they can and as quick as they can. And they got to realize it still takes human touch to do it. I love the places like Lovable and things like that. They're amazing. They make websites, but you can see a lot of repetition of things that are going on that are out there. So they got to really go back and put that human touch into it.
Yeah, good point. Charles?
Seconding on what Paul was saying, I think you get a lot of tech debt, and there's a lot of great kind of work that's been written around. Obviously, you can't go from like 0 to 100 leveraging only AI. You actually need people to understand the code to at least fact check. And so that's an issue for especially like first time experienced founders. larger kind of macro questions, right? It's never been easier to kind of go 0 to 1, right? And so especially for like some of the hot industries, again, like Paul was saying earlier, you see a lot, so much competition. Like I presume Paul's probably seen like a million legal tech AI companies, and it's like, how do you, and it's like, oh yeah, you're like a kid from Mish or CMU, like you've never even used a lawyer before, like why, like why are you going to an industry that's just because it's hot? Which I don't love. And so there's that like, oh wow, I'm gonna go to this industry because it's hot, and you end up kind of wasting time when you could have just been doing something you might find actually interesting. And so there's a little bit of that. And then I think on the ESO accelerator venture side, I think there's a ongoing conversation. I'd love to hear Paul's thoughts on this around like how far can you push the evaluation point? How much can you leverage AI in your evaluation of companies, given that the best companies are always outliers, right? And so it's kind of like a little bit of it butts heads, right? And how do we think about like, is this just like perpetuating bias? How useful can it be in diligence and like feeling out that process? But those are like some of the questions that come to my mind.
Do you want to answer that, Paul, and then we can wrap up?
Yeah, what was going to my head is some of these AI products are easily replicated. So, having anything that's protectable on these is weird. So as an investor, looking at these saying, somebody comes through and, like I said, builds this product, what are you protecting? Why can't I make that? So that's tough as an investor to throw money at something that, 10, 20, 30 of them can be out there. It's hard to know which one's going to bubble up to the top. That's the hardest part.
Cool. Awesome. We'll end on that note. Thanks both of you for joining. We will send the slides around. We'll do this again, I think, in December with a different topic. If anybody is interested in also participating, feel free to shoot me a note. You can connect with Charles or Paul on LinkedIn. Hopefully you guys can build some connection too. Looks like someone said from Sheffield said hello, sister city to Pittsburgh. Woo woo. Thanks again for joining me, and we'll rotate up the topics too, and hopefully some practical advice. And thanks guys again for joining. Talk soon.
Okay, thanks, Darren.